If you've got a Bible, turn to Acts, please. We're going to have a quick look at Acts 1. I'm going to read verses 6 to 14 together. So Thursday was some days after Easter.
It's about 40
days, isn't it? 40 days after Easter. It's Ascension Day, which is when we particularly remember Jesus being taken to heaven. So we're going to read that story and then think about what we might learn about our life as missionaries and followers of Jesus, and connect that up with some of that community stuff. So this is Acts 1, 6 to 14. Then they gathered round him and asked him, "Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" He said to them, "It's not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." After he said this, he was taken up before their eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them. "Men of Galilee," they said, "why do you stand here looking into the sky? The same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back the same way you have seen him go into heaven." Then the apostles returned to Jerusalem from the hill called the Mount of Olives, a Sabbath day's walk from the city. When they arrived, they went upstairs to the room where they were staying. Those present were Peter, John, James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas son of James. They all joined together constantly in prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. So Ascension Day marks one more pivot, one more shift in the story of Jesus and the life of the apostles. I loved some of the memes and jokes that were going around on Facebook on Ascension Day. I must have very niche friends, because I saw it a few times, saying Ascension Day was when Jesus started to work from home, which I think is great, and it's true, isn't it? The job on earth was done for Jesus. It was job done for him, and he went up to take his place at the Father's side and continues to reign and rule and pray, we're told, for the church. There, Jesus is working from home, and the baton is passed on to a new group. Jesus, you see, shared his ministry from the start with his group of followers. It was never just the Jesus show. One of the first things he does in any of the Gospels is find some people and say to them, "Follow me." And for some, this calling is really literal. It's get up, come away from what you're doing, leave your work, and come with me, join me on the road, come and be part of the Jesus traveling band. The 12 disciples, and some women are mentioned doing this as well, leave their homes and follow Jesus around as his ministry team and his apprentices on the job, learning from him. And as they follow him, they become a part of the community. There's others for whom this is a bit more of a metaphor. They follow Jesus kind of emotionally and spiritually, but actually they stay where they are. So we know that Martha, Mary and Lazarus were followers and friends of Jesus, but didn't go from place to place with him, certainly not all the time. Instead, they welcomed Jesus into their home, and they were kind of a base for Jesus when he was coming near there. They lived quite near Jerusalem, so they became a stopping point for him on his way there. But Jesus collects a group of people and says to them, "Follow me." And as they follow him and become a part of his community, they learn to do the stuff that he does, defeating the works of evil, casting out demons, healing, sharing the good news, caring for the poor. And at times he sends them out without him to do it. Luke tells us that he's at least twice he sends out 12 of them and then 72 of them to go and get on with that work themselves without him. And lots of the time they get to help out. They learn by doing with Jesus. They become people through whom God's kingdom comes as they share life with Jesus. And then the events of Maundy Thursday to Easter Sunday kind of upturn all of that. And just imagine for a moment how shocking and terrifying and upturning that must have been. But they find a way to adapt. Maybe they talk about a new normal. I don't know. I don't like that phrase. But perhaps they talk about that. They talk about a new way of existing after Easter, where Jesus isn't there all the time, but he pops up now and again and gives them some fish or some bread and shares something with them. And they are carrying on. But then it all changes again. Jesus ascends. He's taken to heaven. This time he's properly gone. And before he goes, he tells them to wait. Wait and pray. And that they will receive power. That word, is that my time? By the way, brilliant. That's really helpful. That word is repeated throughout Acts. Power. It's at least 7 times in Acts, and it's always in the future of Acts, and the rest of it always associated with a miracle that goes alongside the gospel being preached. Think about some of the great miracle stories of Acts. Peter and John going to pray and healing the lame person. Things like that. That word power comes up again and again when those events happen, and they're always followed by a preaching of the gospel and loads of people becoming Christians. Jesus says to them, you'll receive power, and then you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. In our kind of paraphrase type language, we could say in Jerusalem, the town where you are, in Judea and Samaria, near and far, close and far away, and to the ends of the earth, everywhere. Imagine again how you might feel as a disciple at that point. Just as you're getting used to a new way of living with you in Jerusalem and Jesus coming and going, and you're not quite sure when he's going to pop up, and you're getting used to the idea that he's risen from the dead. It all changes again, and you have to adapt once more. I wonder if any of that feeling feels familiar. Feels like we're having to adapt quite quickly, and things are changing, doesn't it? And there's shifting patterns. Well, they have to adapt, but in the change, they have a job to do. Their job is to continue the work of Jesus. Wait a few days, receive the power, and then get on and change the world. Get on and share the good news. The situation, the challenges change, but the job hasn't. They're called to be empowered witnesses. And we are called to be, those of us who know Jesus, whose lives have been changed by him, are called to be empowered witnesses, taking the story of Jesus to everyone, wherever we go. For lots of us right now, of course, that means in our homes, with our neighbours, with our workplaces, and in our online or phone connections, doesn't it? The story hasn't changed. The commission hasn't changed. We're sent to be witnesses. But do you notice what they do after all this? It's right there at the end. They go to their shared home. Let me read. When they arrived, they went upstairs to the room where they were staying. Tells you who was there. Says some names. And it says they joined in constantly in prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. Jesus' closest followers are living together in Jerusalem. They are sharing life. They've adopted not just his teaching, but his pattern. They worship and pray constantly. They live in community. They witness to others. They're even in the same room. I mean, that would be a great sitcom, wouldn't it? Jesus' followers all in the same room, all falling out and making up and all of that. As Jesus' words come true, they continue to spread across the whole world. They preach the message, they change lives. They keep this pattern going of teams gathering in communities to share good news together. Now, our context is different, modern day Harrogate, but our commission is the same, and our pattern is very similar too. We form little teams who live as community that they might spread the good news of Jesus with those around them. We want everybody to know the transforming power of life with God. So we love God, we build community, and we share Jesus together. And like those back then, we do that in smaller groups as well as bigger gatherings like this, and we call them Kairos communities. In a moment, we're going to show you five snapshots of Kairos communities, little stories of who they are and how they're adapting to life in lockdown, how they're working out how to change and follow out that commission today. But before we do, I want to just say why I think they're so important a bit more. We love the big worship at Kairos. We love all being together. But we also know that, like those first disciples, we're called to spread and to spread out, not just on our own, but in teams, in community. And it's these communities that empower us and encourage us to live as Jesus' witnesses on our streets, in our homes, at our work. The people we're in community with help us live a life on mission together. Jesus's friends lived that life, didn't they? A life of constant prayer of worship, a life where they shared what they had, they lived together, and a life of witness and service out. And we follow a similar pattern here. We talk about up, in, and out. Worship, community, mission. Living our lives focused on loving God, living our lives focused on loving and supporting each other, living our lives focused on loving and sharing good news with the world. We love the big gatherings. We love doing this, and when the time's right, you can pop that down, thank you. Well, when the time's right, we will get back to 9 o'clock communion, 10:30 gatherings. It will happen. It might be different, but it will happen. But we also believe that the smaller group, the Kairos community, is powerful and flexible and a strong way of living together as God's church. Not everyone's able to join a community. Get that. Some people can't do that at particular times. Some of our gatherings actually feel a bit like a blur between that. 9 o'clock communion, for example, has lots of the same things that Kairos communities have. It's a bit smaller. Everyone knows each other really well. Everyone's able to love and care for each other. But we try and do community. We try and live in this way because we want to go together to the people God sends us to. As we watch these videos, I'd love to encourage you to do 3 things. I'd love to encourage you to rejoice, to pray, and to ask. I'd love to encourage you to rejoice. Rejoice at what you hear happening. Even in the little changes and adapting, people making space, finding new patterns, rejoice. Thank God for what's going on amongst our church. Even if you're not part of one of these communities, thank him that his people are moving forward, are sharing good news with others. Pray for our communities, pray for our community leaders. We're all on a steep learning curve with this, aren't we? We're all having to change, adapt, find new ways of living, new ways of connecting. Pray that our communities would be places where God's power and God's love is known strongly. The Thy Kingdom Come stuff we've been sharing on Facebook, the 24/7 prayer room, are great ways where you could dig into praying this week. So pray for our community leaders and ask God what's next for you. If you're not in a community, is it time to join one? Time to get involved in this aspect of Kairos' life? If you are in a community, what is the next step for you in fulfilling that call to be filled with God's power and share his good news with everyone? If you're watching this from somewhere else, if you're not, you don't consider yourself part of Kairos, but you are watching it, you are really welcome. It's brilliant to have you with us. Maybe ask God what he might be saying to you through it. Maybe you could join one of our communities. You'd be really welcome to. And if you want to do that, get in touch. We'll find a way for you to get connected up. It'll be really simple. But if you're part of a different church or geographically somewhere else, maybe ask, how could you build community, develop relationships with people around you so that you're not so much on your own, you're with others. So as we watch these videos, rejoice at what God's doing. Pray that he would fill our communities and our community leaders with power and strength, and ask him, what is the response that you could make? Is it time to get involved? Is it time to take a step further with your community? Is it time to try to build relationships and a sense of community where you are? So we're going to watch the first video, and this is, well, they will introduce themselves, and they're fabulous.